Come on up here. Come on, everybody give Stuart a round of applause. Who has not heard of Scenic City Summit? All right. I know better. Scenic City Summit is a one-day developer conference. It's our second year. It's going to be held this year at the Chattanooga Convention Center. Who's got tickets already? Great, great. For the rest of you, get tickets. It's going to be a fantastic event. We have about 30 speakers, some national, a lot regional, one or two from here. It's a very affordable conference. Till end of day tomorrow, you've got early bird pricing. The ticket is only $65, includes lunch, and there's going to be an after party hosted by Squid. There, it's going to be one of the events in Chattanooga this year that you won't want to miss. And if you get those tickets, get those tickets. Web apps, is that right? Yeah, something like that. Wait, I'm gonna actually look at the title here. Yeah, I was right. I was totally right. I shouldn't doubt myself so much. Progressive web apps in the Windows ecosystem. We have a. I thought everybody. I thought we were JavaScript fatigued. I don't know. I thought we were. I thought we were over build systems. Good crowd out here. On that note, without further ado, Scott is going to talk to us about Brunch today. That's why you're all here. And he's a software engineer at Paragon Systems, right? Is that right, Paragon? Yeah? Okay. Everybody give a round of applause for Scott.
Supporters and coworkers that have come out. I think they've helped to increase the number too. But all right. First, before I launch into the talk about what Brunch is, about myself, so that this wouldn't just be business, so that you could know a little bit about me too. So actually, I have some pictures too that I think will help to frame that. Just 3 pictures. This first one, it's kind of a little bit hard to see. My office, we have our office up off Mountain Creek Road, and we used to have an office in St. Elmo. Didn't have many windows. We've got great windows now and a great view out there towards some hills. So I'm very thankful for that, and we like to work with the sunlight. So I'm very thankful. Just you can get a picture of where I do my day-to-day work and brunching in the DevOps track that I've been on for the last few months. So that's the office where I work. As Brett mentioned, I work for Paragon Component Systems. That's most likely, unless you're here and already know me, that's most likely a name you haven't heard, but we're a small startup working with next picture, truss. I can put my hand in triangles like we often have to do. When I explain to people my job is software for designing and analyzing wooden trusses. Maybe someday steel too, but wood for the moment. Web-based software to smartly design these trusses and just build better software for this industry in which the software has kind of stagnated and there's not much improvement. So we're hopefully the force of innovation in the industry. So there's a truss. Then a little bit of just a brief, my own back history. Grew up in Western Michigan. Went to Covenant College. That's how I came down here for 4 years. Graduated in 2015. Was blessed with the privilege to be able to graduate and assist my coworkers I knew at Covenant as well. Thankful that Dr. Hunt is here. He was a great supporting influence during my time at Covenant. So I'm very thankful for the roots I've been able to put down here and work the last 2 years with friends here in Chattanooga. It's been such a blessing. All right. With that introductory remarks, we will launch into the talk, the meat of the talk itself. So I've entitled this talk, Brunch by Lunch, Towards a Better Build System. And I'll admit I was trying to be a little bit clickbaity, and I think it's kind of an ambitious title, or maybe a title that claims more than it can deliver a little bit, but I wanted you all to come and hear about brunch, so that's why I called it that. But I think, I should say, in order to not skew the survey, if you work with me, don't raise your hand. If you work with a web build system. Okay, great. Then the second question is provide a little bit of a numerator for our little informal survey. How many of you use Gulp for that system? All right. How many use Webpack? Ooh, nice. Anybody still? I didn't mean to there. And my own narrative back, that seems to be the arc. And at the end of the day, you should be choosing a build system based on what works best in your context. But I think there are general guiding principles that will give you an understanding of how you can decide what's best for your context and what might generally be best for most contexts. And that's what we'll be talking about. So thanks for humoring me with my little informal survey. Next thing we want to talk about is warrant and values. So when I say warrant, I'm talking about two things, two questions. Why is this talk warranted? Why should you be listening? We've doubled our workforce with interns this summer. We went from 5 to 10, essentially-ish. And that really brought some issues to the surface, pain points to the surface, where it's like we were just, when it was kind of just me and one person decided to make this integration better. So efficiency. Second thing, why is this talk warranted? Why should you be listening? Entry-level accessibility is important and desirable. So I'm talking about entry-level accessibility on two fronts. Firstly, in your company. So someone starts at your company, they're working with your web app. How easy is it for them to start building? Like, do they need to, how many things they need people like React and other Redux, things that are making that world better, but if we can't bundle that together, build it, actually deliver a product, have the thing that bundles it all together, if that doesn't work well, then we're not achieving entry-level accessibility, and we're not necessarily getting, we might get people like, oh man, yeah, I built a little web app, but then like the building just bogs you down, and you get stuck on that. Second question with warrant knowledge, and so maybe what I said, but at least you've interacted with, hopefully with the DevOps process and try to streamline it and make it better. And so I've really had my head into this for a while, and I'm thankful for that. I've also had the privilege, maybe privilege isn't the right word, I don't know, but it's the necessity of, I've worked both server-side and client-side stack, and so I'll talk about that a little bit later too. But, so why should you be listening to me? So I've had some DevOps, yeah, you can decide if you're warranted in listening to me. Thirdly, important, framing the talk as we go forward, what things concretely apply to the everyday. First, I essentially want it to be invisible. Secondly, with entry-level accessibility, when I do have to edit the build system, I want it to be easy and straightforward. I don't want to sink time into that, ideally, right? And yeah, that's valuable even if you do care about DevOps. You want it to be easy and streamlined when you have to edit it. Second value is efficiency. I want my build system to be fast. I don't want to be sitting and waiting for builds to happen, for the watch to keep going through. Secondly, with efficiency, again, when I edit a system as a freelancer or as just a hobby developer, we want to be able to actually accomplish these best practices, and because we value clear ways to achieve standards. All right, so that's the talk about warrant values. Next thing, just quickly talk about some goals, make some reiterations about sort of the framework for the rest of the talk going forward. Again, I don't want to necessarily acclaim Brunch, although I do believe it is a useful tool in moving us towards a better web build system. I do believe it should have more press than it's gotten. And I think in many ways it's sack, and if that's your jam, you should probably keep going with that. And I think that's great, and I think that meets a lot of the principles that we had going forward too. But our story at our business, competency, but I ended up moving on to Brunch, and it works for us, and I think y'all should hear them. Towards a world where our values are reality, entry-level accessibility, efficiency, and clear ways to achieve standards. And I want to present Brunch as a fitting mechanism for this. So this can be shown by establishing the deficiencies in the status quo. But if I did just that, that'd be cynical. That would just be being destructive. So I want to be constructive too, and that's why I bring Brunch into the web build systems. If I can provide a constructive way to move forward, which I believe you can see in front, I believe that I'm not just being cynical about the world as it is. I provide that caveat about being cynical because, so the next slide, we're going to talk about the status quo. So it's 2017, and I want to build a web app. You may have seen, I'm going to dangerously exit my presentation for a moment. This article, and it says 2016, but I think it's applicable in 2017 too. If not, I'll post this in a comment or something. You should definitely look it up. It's a Socratic sort of going through one man to another, talking about what it's like, and there's like all these libraries in the status quo, JavaScript, and there's so many things that that you have to aggregate together if you're building on the front end today. I'm hoping that eventually we'll move towards a better system, but if you've seen this article, you'll know what I'm talking about. I'll drop it in a link afterwards. And you can see the picture there too. And it's like, well, what's the right thing to do? And even with build systems, right, there's so many choices. That guy, and he's a little bit skeptical of the JavaScript world. And so when I'm like, oh, we need to try this, this is what people are talking about. He's like, it's just the JavaScript flavor of the month. And I think he's right to have some caution going forward and maybe let the dust settle a little bit first. But yeah, there's also another article while I'm here. And actually, one of my coworkers just shared this with me this morning. And Corey House, how Gulp and Grunt were too complicated. And I would tend to agree with that for what we're trying to do. They're overpowered, or at least Gulp in particular. But his contention that we should move towards NPM scripts, I would at least challenge that contention and say that perhaps, depending on how he implements that might be going a little too far into the domain of custom stuff. I don't feel, maybe this is just me, but I don't feel secure in my code unless I know I'm like implementing the state. So I think NPM scripts are warranted, but we still want a position where I want a position where I feel like I'm implementing best standards, best practices, rather than making my own little build scripts, however it may be. All right, let's see if I can return to the presentation. The world of writing a web app, there are some things that people have tried to make, like Yeoman, I don't know how to say it. Right? It's gained some traction, but not a ton. One of the new things that we'll actually be working with a little bit later is called Great Lumen. I don't think I'd necessarily recommend it. Practical, right? Valuable too, and I believe Brunch helps us reach that value. So yeah, when you're dealing with existing projects, you don't have this luxury. Even if you do, there's a good chance you'll have to understand the build system at some point. There's going to be some modification. So this is part of why we need a build system, so we can code in the future while living in the present. We have to aggregate all these disparate factors, these different libraries that we're working with. So let's talk about high-level theory again. What would we desire, at least as base minimum requirements in a good build system? So I've suggested some things here that I think are at least kind of minimum in aggregating these, like where we won't have iterations of JavaScript. Maybe there'll always be new features we'll think of, but at least a more stable where we're not like adding new features every year and browsers aren't caught up. So I hope at least someday browsers will be caught up, and this maybe won't have to be a part of our build system. But for the moment, it is. Bundling modules, of course, is also important. Seems like it's a good idea to sort of separate your vendor code and your own application code so that the browser can cache. The reloading and serving would be great if that's part of our build system. For production environments, we want to be able to minify. We want to be able to optimize our code to serve it in production, smaller file sizes, that sort of thing, obfuscating variables. So the next things we'll talk about are, one of those is convention over configuration. I believe this is fitting in designing our ideal build system, because if we've got those ideas, those requirements that we've established for our ideal build system, it seems like this thing, and rather than configuring like, okay, I need to do my pipeline of first I pipe and JSX and all that, right? Like, I shouldn't have to think about that because transpilation should just happen by default, ideally. At least that's my vision. In a world where we value declarative over imperative, just a quick review is our folder structure and the different resources we're using for transpilation and how we want our modules split out into lib and vendor and stuff, or vendor and app. Then I think we value a system that's declarative over imperative. We just want to tell it what those things are and not how to do them, and it's responsible for implementing that in the most efficient way possible. Oh, yeah, just a note about a little bit of our example, how we saw it play out at our workplace. And it wasn't quite that big of a difference, but it was a difference for sure. And so the pros of convention over configuration are there's not much boilerplate. right? There's just kind of, yeah, just the bare minimum of things you need. The con is it can feel like magic, and if you're, and I did have some frustrations as we were switching to Brunch and lots of Google searches, even if you Stack Overflow questions. I'll be honest about that. It wasn't necessarily easy to switch to Brunch, but I think it's taking us to a better place. And ideologically, I think, all right. Oh, one more thing about declarative over imperative things through. And I think, yeah, in general, system, and we can gulp, but in general, hopefully, you can just use a build matrix. Just do a quick check on time. Okay. I think at this point, I'm just gonna visit the website. Saying your build system nightmares, you should probably grab it by the horns and try to do something better. So yeah, 3 simple commands. They're striving for simplicity, and I think that's to be commended. Brunch new, to create a new project, that's where I'm talking about, like Yeoman, they would scaffold out the app for you. Not necessarily that valuable, but then Brunch build and Brunch watch. 2 basic commands. They're trying to be simple. They're trying to, I think, they're allowing them to do that. For ourselves, we'll gulp config. They've got it in really small print there versus typical Brunch config. Looks like y'all can see that, hopefully. So yeah, all the Brunch configs I've written have been longer than this. Put that out front there. But I just want to talk about, this is getting into the weeds. We're not as theoretical right now, right? But some of the things, so I have files, and I want to compile into one file, concat them. So I've got my vendor, my app, and there's just a regex function. So a simple case of delineating folders. I want all the code in this folder to go to my app.js, and I want all the code not in that folder, that's what that regex is saying, to go into the vendor. So things like in node modules will go in there and get compiled. Similarly, I want my style sheets to be joined to app.css. There's no, obviously, yeah, if you're using Sass or whatever, you have to do that in a plugin. Oh yeah, and there's plugins down there. That's great. So most of the time, you'll probably be using plugins. So latest, so using post CSS, Brunch config file looks like. It's key. It's helping us to meet. Let's talk. Then the gulp config file is. I'll let you be honest in your own heart. That into there. I think that's much easier to approach, which also helps with your efficiency. You're not going to sink as much time into it. Also, final value was clear ways to achieve standards. So if we yeah. So there are also some things that are implicit here. Another thing is, you always have your assets files that just need to be copied over. That just happens by default complete for Brunch. That's a downside, but maybe it's been at least a little time tested and had time to mature some. So one thing I wanted to show you, actually I'll just show that later. I was going to show you how fast Brunch. Okay, returning to things. I took us from building with gulp to building with, and I want to show you, well, and so with gulp, we had basically 1 to 2 second watch, sometimes even more. File in the similar, both in length and content. So that was encouraging that I was at least maybe doing what other people are doing in gulp, but I'm not fully responsible for this gulp file either. And I say that as far as the yeah, as far as, like, I didn't do all this work, and I'm glad someone did, but then revisiting it made it kind of hard, too. So we're just scrolling through the gulp file, lots of stuff going on there. We're piping. Here's our scripts task. And things are separated into tasks. That's nice. I mean, there is meaning there, right? It's a logical system, but it's still hard. And I think it can be easier based on the requirements we set up. And so we end up with, I think it's, yeah, approach -- server, I believe, and it will serve your files for you out of your build folder, which is great. That's another thing where it's a convention over configuration. We had to set that up in gulp, and we just had auto reloading because we installed a package and it's a Brunch package for that, or an npm package that was like auto reload Brunch. But Brunch also then lets, if you need more configuration for that server watching files, you can set up this little mini Node Express server that's going to handle that. But you can see here we've got files. You may recognize some of that from the homepage there. Setting up our conventions here. Paths that we're watching. Auto-requiring a module, so that's where the app will start. Then we've got our plugins. Oh yeah, so we're doing ES linting, right? That's a plugin. Maybe that should have been on requirements, but I was trying to go as base level as possible. We've got we've got this assets manager. We've got styles for CSS stuff, and then we use like a Pug, formerly Jade, for HTML stuff. So that actually, unfortunately, takes quite a few lines. I wish it took fewer. And then we've got some server configurability for efficiency and for a clear way. All right. I had prepared an example, so I want to just I was going to work through it with you, but I think the people at Facebook have done a lot of great things for the developer community. We use React and Redux at work, both thanks to Facebook putting those out there and kind of defining standards for these are good ways to do development on the client side. And they're sort of leading the charge there and also making it open source, which they're benefiting from and we're benefiting from. So I might be okay with seeing that. I think like in the case of C# and the way the build system works there, it works great most of the time because Microsoft takes care of that and does that. And so that means more monolith corporate control. And I think we value the grassrootsness of the JavaScript world, but it does lead to certain conundrums like this where it's like, what build system do I choose? And who's going to set some leadership from the corporate giants like Facebook, I think is helpful. And I would love to see more leadership from corporate giants as far as what are the right build systems to use. But Facebook has put out this thing called Create React App, which you clone the repo, or you npm install it, you don't clone the repo. And then you just like create React App, and you do like npm start, and that'll start serving your application to make changes. I don't know if this is the case for y'all, but npm takes dreadfully long to run installs and stuff. Probably a good thing I'm not trying to do that anyway. But I think this one's a clean one. I'm going to try npm start. And we'll see if that comes up in the browser. So here's a truss. That's what we're working on. Just a little sneak preview, fun fact. So we do actually build websites. I'm not just blowing steam. But so here's Create React App. It works out of the box. It's great. And if you look in that folder, I see node modules. As far as boilerplate goes, I don't even see any config files, webpack.config or whatever. I don't see anything like that. And Facebook has intentionally obscured that from me. And I can run npm and eject, and then I can see all that stuff. And then I can edit the webpack file if I need to. But they're trying to obscure that for me and make it easy. So I decided, we've to a better world. I also wanted to take another situation, not a contrived example, and I wanted to make Brunch work for that. So I actually took Create React App, as they have it here, and I made it work with Brunch, the Brunch config file. And my original claim, brunch by lunch, may hold true, depending on how you do your timing. So it took me all said and done, took me about 5.5 hours to do this example, to get the same thing you saw in the browser there, the same default app working Brunch. Lunch. Then you could have this by lunch. I did say it was a bold claim to begin with. But let's just kind of look at the Brunch config file here and see what I had to do. And again, it was basically, I'm plugging things in. A big part, like I say, a lot of that time was kind of figuring out the post-CSS stuff. That was a new concept to me, something new too. Challenge yourself. And so that style sheets, what we're auto-requiring, our conventions. Interestingly, so by default, Brunch outputs builds to the public folder. However, as you may have noticed, or I think this, so we actually had to change that, and I had to change my build directory to build. There's that. And then I have plugins for the, actually that was it, the index.html file here, and put a few script tags in here to link things. So maybe that makes my work less legitimate in your eyes. I want to at least put that caveat out there. But before, Webpack was somehow magically injecting it in there. And so I'm like, well, I'm at least going for a basic minimal example, so I'm going to just add those things. And then I, of course, had to change some of the import stuff for what was it actually here in app.js. Yeah, so I removed some import statements from the top and did things a little bit differently. I wanted to actually put it to the test and see experience. Talked about create React demo, create React app demo. Finally, I wanted to provide some concrete metrics for benchmark assessments of your own. So you can go home, if you've got a web build system, and go back to your workplace and say, do I meet these benchmarks or these metrics? And if not, should I reconsider? Should I be making my DevOps pipeline better? Whether that's Brunch, whether that's Webpack. How can I be making my DevOps better to realize gains sooner, to make my developers happier, to be efficient, entry-level accessibility, easy ways to meet standards. So I have some concrete metrics here that you can ask yourself. For entry-level accessibility, is your build system less than 100 lines? We were able to achieve that by switching to Brunch. You could probably achieve that by switching to Webpack, too. It's also declarative. It, in many ways, a lot like Brunch, but Brunch is even more opinionated about things, I think, than Webpack is, from my minimal experience with it. Speed and efficiency. Are your watches less than 1 second? So as you're developing and you're updating your code, are your watches less than 1 second? That's something that we, at least for me, if it's greater than 1 or 2 seconds and I have to go back and check my console, has it finished building? Whereas if I can basically count on it's built because it's done in less than a second, then so much is to be gained there. And just, that's great. There's a bug with the latest version, little gotcha. Use 2.9.1. Brunch doesn't have it all together, but I think it's pointing us in the right direction. So do you have source maps? Do you have auto reloading? Conventions, special for questions, but that's what I'd like to present. What do you mean by? Yeah, can you control S whether or not that's being actively watched to see those updates?
Okay, so it's telling you your browser which URL to.
Well, the watch is no, it's not establishing the URL. It's a config for Brunch. Brunch then has localhost : whatever port you set to see your local development of that app. And the things that only updates if you changed something in one of the watched folders.
Okay, gotcha. Which ones is it building? Okay, gotcha.
Feel free to tweet at me or email me too if you got them. I don't know.
So how did you get buy-in from the people above you? Because that's something with flavor of the month Java. How do you?
I think you need to. It helps if the person you're talking to. Well, first you have to examine your audience. Maybe there's just public speaking principles, but how much does my audience know about coding? So can I speak to them on that level, or do I need to establish more theoretical values, things like efficiency, entry-level accessibility, things like talking about, I think, all on what maybe you're fine.
For this last one. Have you tried writing a custom plugin for something, or what's the plugin ecosystem like, and how many people are doing custom plugins for things that are not obvious?
Yeah, I've found plugins for almost everything we've needed. The plugin ecosystem, so it's at least fairly complete, I would say. I do get a little. So
all right, everybody give a round of applause to Scott. Yeah.
If not everything.